The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization that promotes voter education and advocacy. I'm Annette Tucker Sutherland, chair of the Shaker Heights chapter of the League of Women Voters of Greater Cleveland. Welcome to our audience at the Community Center tonight, as well as to our audience live streaming. If you enjoy events such as this, please consider joining the League of Women Voters. We invite Shaker's mayor to make an annual State of the City address in order to share information and to nurture community engagement. This year, we have asked him to emphasize the city's work around police reforms agreed to in the resolution adopting a framework for maintaining a safe and just Shaker Heights, adopted by City Council in August of last year, and negotiated to prevent a citizen-proposed charter amendment from appearing on the ballot, as well as community recreation facilities related to the school facility projects. A bit of background. Our mayor is elected for 4-year terms. As chief executive, he oversees all city staff and operations and implements decisions by City Council. The city's annual budget is roughly $66 million for operating and $8 million for capital. David Weiss was appointed by elected City Council members when former Mayor Earl Lycan resigned in 2018. Mayor Weiss was then elected in 2019 and again in 2023. His professional background is more than 30 years experience in law and business, particularly in real estate development. Before the mayor speaks, here is our moderator for the evening, Frank Goforth. Frank has served as the League's observer and reporter on City Council as well as Finance Committee meetings since 2017. Thank you, Frank.
Good evening. After the mayor's presentation, we'll have time for questions. Anyone and everyone may submit questions written on note cards. In order to avoid repetition, we'll gather questions for a small panel of volunteers to organize and sometimes summarize those questions being handed to the moderator, myself. We also have questions that were emailed in advance, and there are questions coming in online in real time. Annette Himes, Susan Beaudry, and Lynn Roth are going to be gathering those cards as we go forward. We'll accept questions on note cards from live audience members or yourself. Please raise your hand if you need a note card and pass your completed question card to the row end so that they can be picked up. We're monitoring the live stream for questions from our virtual audience in real time. Excuse me. We'll try to include questions and topics within the time available this evening. We need to conclude by 8:30 by the rules of this building. To support engagement that is civil and constructive, we have some basic guidelines for everybody. This is a space for learning and not debating. This is not a space for finger pointing or using inflammatory language, please. And please reference your own experience, avoiding any generalizations. If a line of questions is repetitive, we'll move on to another topic. Our event will begin with a prepared presentation from the city's chief executive. Then we will open for questions and answers. Mayor Weiss, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to come before the League. I want to thank you, the League, for sponsoring this event tonight, not only for doing events like this, which you do all year long, but also your efforts to promote good government across our city and across the region and across the state. So we admire and appreciate your efforts. A couple other thank yous. Thank you for Frank for tonight moderating. You know, I've known each other for quite a while, and so it's a pleasure to have him up here with me. Some other just thank yous. I saw Amy Schweitzer, the library director. She's joined us tonight. Thank you, Amy. Kim Bixenstein from council. And I'm going to have, just real quickly, rather than go through every, I'm going to have, oh, Carmela, thank you. Good to see you, too. I missed you, sorry. Is that Meredith back there? My glasses are need a little tweaking, but Meredith Turner from our county councilwoman. I'm just going to have the staff just stand real quickly for one moment, so you can see who's here, and maybe just give a round of applause for the great work that they do. You know, I was not expecting to have our police chief and 3 of his commanders with us tonight. So between the police department and our fire chief, you all are in the safest place in the city today. So it is all good, all good. There are a couple directors I should just mention who are not here tonight because of COVID. So normally I rely on my directors when I get a hard question that I can't answer. I rely on the directors, and so I'm going to be out in the boat without a paddle tonight. There are 3 areas that I'm going to touch on tonight. The first is just an update on ongoing projects and initiatives. The second is to give an update on the progress of the framework implementation that Annette mentioned. Talk briefly about the recreation planning, and then provide time for questions and answers. I have promised Frank and the League and Annette that I would try to be very high level so we can get through a lot of the things that we're doing, and that'll be hopefully leave enough time for your questions. So I'm going to kind of chug right along through these. Most of the projects, hopefully you know a lot about, but we'll hopefully give you a little bit of update on where we stand. So I'm going to start with economic development. I think most of you know that economic development is near and dear to my heart, and it's been one of the kind of hallmarks of my administration, and council has been very supportive in this effort. So first of all, second phase of Van Aken District, phase 2 of the VAD, coming along very well, on schedule. 228 new units in 2 buildings, 2 towers, one 15 and one 18 stories high. You can't miss it if you're going up to the Van Aken District. And I either drive or ride or run pretty much every day, and you can watch the glass going up around the 2 buildings. But on time, broke ground in 2022, topped out with the last steel beam last year, and pre-leasing has started, and it should be done by late summer, early fall, would be my best guess at the moment. Important, it's a huge and important project for a lot of reasons, but it will add density, vibrancy, and diversity in our housing. We don't have anything like this in Shaker. Frankly, we don't have anything quite like this on the east side of town. Terrific benefits for the city, generating income tax revenues for the city, property tax revenues for the schools, and job creation. By our last count, at year end of 22, there were 830 jobs created or generated by the construction going on here. So all very, very positive. The other project that is about ready to come out of the ground is the Arcadia project. This is on the mixed-use development on the vacant lot across from Shaker Rocks, between Shaker Rocks and the church. We are working with a company out of Columbus called Metropolitan Holdings. They have been absolutely fabulous to work with. They are planning on building a mixed-use facility with a little bit of retail on the first floor, office on the second floor, which will house RDL Architects, who are a business in the city down here on Chagrin, have now moved because they're short on space, and will take over a good chunk of the second floor. And then about 140 units of residential on the upper floors. They have received almost all of their approvals, so they are ready to go. They've now submitted and applied for building permits. And so as soon as that happens, the last piece, not to anyone's surprise, is confirming financing. Financing has been tough the last couple of years, and so, but we're expecting that market to open up as the year progresses, and that's the last piece of the puzzle. The one interesting fact that maybe you know, hopefully you do, but if not, you will now. The interesting thing about this building is it's a mixed income building. So of the 140 or so units, 25 will be reserved for workforce or middle income housing. So it will provide caps on rent for those people that qualify on an income basis. And this is the first apartment building that we have in the city that is a mixed income. So we're very, very proud of that. We hope that the groundbreaking is this summer. So keep an eye open for that. Probably the largest project we're really underway on is the Lee Road Action Plan. Again, most of you have probably heard of this. This is a complete renovation, revitalization of Lee Road from Van Aken all the way down to Scottsdale at the Cleveland border and really beyond. We're working very closely with Mayor Bibb and his administration to actually continue the development that's going on Lee Road into Cleveland, which will eventually get down to 480. But in the meantime, we are coordinating with the City of Cleveland and their planning department on how we can actually help each other. We've put in applications for grants on a joint basis. We are working very, very closely with them. I've had many conversations with Mayor Bibb. He's very excited to see what we're doing. He's excited to continue the project south of Shaker. The idea really is as you come up Lee Road, you won't know when you leave Cleveland and when you enter Shaker. It should be that seamless. So what's involved? These are all public improvements, things like a road diet, narrowing from 4 lanes down to 3, streetscapes, trees, benches, an off-road multi-purpose path, lighting, public art. All of these things will come into the project as public improvements, which we expect and hope will then generate a good deal of private investment to then actually develop the properties on Lee Road. The good news is we've secured about $17.7 million of grants and other funding sources for this project, which is really exciting. We have a little ways to go. The project we're estimating is in the $25 million range, so we need a little bit more. The other part that is a piece of this is that while we're happy about the dollars, some of them don't come in till a couple years down the road. So these projects take a good deal of time in planning, and so we've hit at the right point and received the grants, but some of the funds don't come in until 26 and 27. So it's most likely, even though I keep telling Joyce, I'm hoping, Braverman, that it's 26, she keeps telling me it may be 27. So we'll see who wins that bet. A tremendous project, a tremendous amount of public engagement and interest in this, particularly from the neighborhood, from Moreland and from Lomond, but community-wide. If you went to any of those public engagement meetings at the dealership and elsewhere, it was packed, and people were really, really excited. I mean, this is a strip of roadway in Shaker that we have not invested in a long, long time, and it is long overdue. So we're very excited about this project. One of the key things that I'll talk a little later about is we're doing all kinds of things throughout this corridor, but in particular, we're very focused right in the center where Shelton Park abuts the back of the bus depot for the schools, and it abuts a property owned by the city. And we're looking to have that, what we call the center city core of this project, really be the centerpiece of this development. So we are working hard on that. Notwithstanding what I said about the timing, the fact that we're not getting the money till 26 or 27 does not mean we aren't doing anything now, because we're doing a tremendous amount now. We are basically laying the groundwork, what I call the backroom work, or the quiet period, because you don't hear a lot about it, but lots of things are happening. So design work will start. We're going to be changing some of the zoning to provide a greater flexibility for businesses on Lee Road. One of the most exciting things we're doing right now as a pilot program is a consolidation of parking. So we have 8 lots side by side on the southern end of Lee Road that are in agreement, and we're now working through funding and final details, where we will combine those 8 lots rather than have each building and each lot have its own parking structure and its own curb cut. Actually combine them all, include landscaping, have one entrance, one exit, and eliminate a lot of the, frankly, excess curb cuts and things that we have that make no sense and, frankly, are quite dangerous. So we are making progress on that front. For those of you who may not be in real estate, to get 8 property owners to agree to do anything is a real amazing. It's not. I'm not being critical. It's just everyone has different interests. They have different goals. They have different objectives for their business. They have different objectives for their property. But Joyce Braverman and Laura Engelhardt have done really just and their team has done a phenomenal job. Let me move to housing. Quite the topic this year. It seems like every year, just when you think, okay, everything is kind of, we got them everything on a kind of smooth path and things are going along well, there's always something that comes up. It's just invariable. Well, this past year's issue was really housing, and in particular, the problems, many of which made the news, for apartment buildings that had heat that did not work consistently, hot water, elevators that worked intermittently, as well as other maintenance issues. And I'll leave it to later in the discussion to get into the details, but suffice it to say that at its core, the problem we struggle with is that our buildings are all nearing 100 years old or more. And for a variety of reasons, deferred maintenance tends to be prevalent in our community. And so problems with physical structures like apartments, multifamily buildings are going to happen if people don't use preventative maintenance on their buildings and are regularly touching up and actually, in some cases, making major repairs to their facilities. So we can talk a little bit more, and Kyle Krusen, our head of building and housing, is with us. He really, if you weren't aware, he was kind of working 24/7 for a number of months, trying to make sure that we were addressing these issues, and where necessary for safety reasons. In fact, when we had to shut down a building or two, worked very closely with the owners and the residents to find adequate housing, temporary housing, until elevators and boilers could be fixed and brought back online. In this case, we usually use a carrot and a stick. In this case, we used a lot of the stick this time. Just to give you a sort of a sense of the magnitude, in 2023, we issued over 3,700 violation notices. We inspected over 8,400 total inspections, including permit inspections. We referred 91 cases to our law department for prosecution, and we averaged complaints of about 3 a day for a good chunk period there, so to address these issues. And so we also held, it's gone down now as repairs are being made, but we were holding nearly $2 million in cash of owners' money that had put money in escrow as part of our point of sale. I know sometimes we debate the need for a point of sale, but in this case, there is no doubt that it was critical and incredibly valuable to make sure these buildings were repaired. And frankly, we were not the only ones dealing with these issues, unless you think it's only Shaker. We have this issue with many of the communities in our region. You may have read probably about a month ago or so, the Ohio Senate had a select committee on housing. We're going around the state taking testimony on the need and issues relating to housing. I gave testimony. That event went from, I think it was 8 or 9 in the morning till 6:30 in the evening, nonstop, 15-minute, 20-minute chunks immediately, boom, 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 all day long. Everyone from Habitat for Humanity to the foundations to land banks to developers to cities, you name it, we were all there commenting on the improvements that we needed and state law changes that would help us deal with these issues. I spoke specifically, and we can come back on this, but specifically about transparency of the of buyers of property, including the use of LLCs or limited liability companies. We talked about the need for and encouraging infill development. To our credit, we've have a great deal of success in the infill area right now, but we need more assistance, and the need for more maintenance programs to help for properties that are in existence today, where people are struggling and need assistance to keep their properties up. The other thing about this, just generally, is this was really an unprecedented set of circumstances that occurred with housing. Since 2020, 43 of Shaker's 106 apartment buildings changed hands. That's 41% of all of the apartment buildings in Shaker got bought by someone else starting in 2020. And that's a huge challenge under any circumstance because of all the work that we do, the inspections that we do for point of sale. Again, Kyle's crew was just pulling their hair out with the number of inspections that they were doing for these buildings. And so just by the sheer volume was really pretty phenomenal. So as difficult as it was, we're pleased with where we ended up. On the bright side, on the good side, we're looking at reinvestment by new owners, which frankly sometimes is what you need. It will bring in about $5 million we're expecting in reinvestment into these apartments. The housing market, let me just touch very briefly, is very, very strong. There's not enough supply to meet the demand, and that's causing prices to rise. Our median price for a single-family home is now $350,000. That's a 3% increase over 2022. Foreclosures are way down. 73 foreclosures last year, down 20% from 2022. And the number of vacant properties is down from 241 down to 150 last year. So there's a lot of good activity going on. I mentioned the infill, which we can come back to. A lot of very positive things going on in the housing market, particularly in Shaker. I'm going to shift now to sustainability and just rattle off, and I'll take any questions you have. I'm going to just rattle off a few things that we're doing because it's a lot, and it is very, very important to our community, and we're very proud of where we are. So on the sustainability side, we initiated our electric aggregation program, an all-green, 100% renewable electric aggregation program for the city of Shaker. We have 2, and now looking at our 3rd, grow, not mow sites. These are areas in the city where we are not cutting the grass and fields. We're letting it grow. It's good for pollinators. It saves on our utility and gas costs. So we're continuing to look at that. We are electrifying every piece of equipment that we can possibly do. This past year, we bought an electric mower. We bought multiple electric tools. We bought this scooter that we use to water the plants, electric scooter. This year, we'll buy another mower. We'll buy a new Zamboni at a significant cost, and we'll buy 2 electric Bolts, Chevy Bolts, for our mental health program. So we'll come back to that as well. But you can sort of get a sense of how much we are doing. I had Michael Peters, who's our coordinator for sustainability. He arranged a tour for me to go see Waste Management's recycling facility. This is like brand new this past year, an amazing facility showing how they recycle and how our single stream that we do. I get people telling me from time to time, I don't think you guys really recycle. I think you all just put it in somewhere and just dump it. Well, the reality is, if you saw this building and you saw what was going on in this building, you would know we're really recycling. It's amazing to see. So we continue to work on that. Tree planting, we planted 660 trees this year. And this work was all done by an army of volunteers, starting first with the Tree Advisory Board, our Sustainability Committee, Friends of Lower Lake, Donebrook Watershed Partnership, Laurel School alumni, Scout troops, Hawkins School, and our Shaker Youth leads. All by way of just mentioning another theme that we'd like to weave in tonight, which is involvement and activity by a broader part of our community in so many of the initiatives that we have going, and we are looking for help. EV, electric vehicle chargers, we have 21 in the city. That is the most that we're aware of in any of the cities nearby us. You can see the Tesla ones up at the Van Aken district, but there are others as well at Thornton Park, up at City Hall, as well as on Larchmere. Our Lomond, our composting pilot, first of all, we're doing a tremendous amount of composting. We'll come back if you have questions. But bottom line is we are composting at every elementary school today. We got funding for a pilot program in Lomond where people can, at no charge under this funded program, bring composting to Lomond and from their home and leave it there and get picked up by our partner, Rust Belt Riders. And it has been a tremendous success. We have already collected over 13,000 pounds of food waste since May, and that's in addition to the 600,000 pounds collected citywide through our normal collection with Rust Belt Riders. An amazing statistic. Which, by the way, is the highest level that Rust Belt Riders has with any community in this region. I'll shift real quickly, and I'm staying pretty close on time, Frank. Just touch on infrastructure, a number of areas here. 8 lane miles of roadways resurfaced last year, nearly 900 large area repairs on Lee Road. If you were driving on Lee Road prior to those improvements, you knew you were on Lee Road because nothing looked quite as bumpy as that did. We finished a culvert project for those of you that live around the Green and South Woodland area. It was an underground culvert underneath Green Road. It was a project we did in tandem with Beechwood as a regional project. The Warrensville Center Bridge, which is vitally important, but boy, is it a project. I got some information that I frankly had not heard about when I was talking with our fire chief the other day about not only just replacing the bridge, but are actually lifting the bridge up to enable RTA and its infrastructure to be maintained underneath that bridge, which is really pretty phenomenal. But that is we are hoping will finish late this year. Donebrook, two huge projects we're doing. So the first relates to the former Horseshoe Lake Park. And the second is the replacement of the dam, future replacement of the dam at Lower Lake. So we are working closely with the city of Cleveland Heights as well as the Northeast Ohio Regional Sewer District on both of these projects. Doan Brook at Horseshoe Lake is a little bit ahead of Lower Lake. We are, the gist generally, if you're not aware, the dam, Horseshoe Lake Dam will be taken down. The two branches of the Doan Brook that run had previously run through the lake will be put back in place as it was before the Shakers or anyone came in this area and changed it. And so they are, the sewer district is in detailed design drawings for that project that should be done by hopefully the end of next year, early next, and construction will start after that. Just to give you a magnitude of the dollars, the work that the sewer district is doing is estimated to cost $24 million, and that will be to take out the bridge, put the Doan Brook branches back in place, and put all kinds of improvements to the park district. The improvements that will be amenities and other improvements that the city will be making, the cities, Cleveland Heights and Shaker, we're estimating another $5.5 million or that in that range, plus design costs for a total project cost of about $30 million. So this will be, this is one of these projects you do once in a lifetime, and it will be here for decades. And it is a project that, if you see the renderings, I think you will agree that it will be an amazing amenity for our community and one that will draw kids, students, seniors, and really bring together our community and our region. And it's going to be phenomenal. And then I mentioned they're working on Lower Lake. That dam will be replaced, so that's going to be a significant change as well there. Timeline for the Horseshoe Lake, designed through the fall, and construction bids expected to go out in 2025. One related piece to Lower Lake is the Lower Lake Trail that runs along the south side of South Park, on the south side of Lower Lake. We received significant funding for this project. It's the one area over by where the mulch and the wood chips are, where there's no sidewalk, and residents have complained for years about safety issues, about kids not being able to walk on a sidewalk and walking in the street. Well, we're going to change that and put a multi-purpose path in there. So construction on that will start this spring. Public art. We don't always talk about public art, but it's always part of what we do, and we're very proud. Actually, the number of pieces of public art in Shaker is remarkable. But we had two that I thought I would just mention. One will be in the Van Aken district. It's part of what we call the public realm. Sorry, I got you out of order maybe. The public realm is the area behind upstairs where the train actually ends. We are going to be making significant improvements there, trees, benches, and public art that will provide shade as well as an incredible visual addition there. This was Reader's Picnic. This is the new art that went up right next to the main library. So as you walk in and hopefully visit Amy in the library, just stick your head around the corner and you will see this piece of artwork. It was made possible through funding provided by Bob and Judy Rawson, former mayor Judy Rawson, very generous and worked very closely. All the books that are shown in this sculpture are of authors from Shaker or the Cleveland area. Let me just mention, and this is the last, kind of the last section that I'll talk about before getting to the last two sections. Forward Together continues to have conversations and work together on a variety of things. Staff in particular, as well as members of the governing bodies for each of the boards, meet at least once a month talking about all kinds of things, particularly now that the school bond issue has passed. There's a myriad of issues that we're working with, all three bodies, to coordinate how can we fill in gaps when buildings are no longer usable, or amenities or fields maybe have limited use. So that's continuing to happen every day. We successfully reached agreement with the schools to add more pickleball courts and access to that in our buildings, which school buildings, which many residents were anxious to see. We also expanded swim time in the pools, school pools. Again, a success. We have had an incredible demand for indoor swimming, and so that's another success. We worked very hard together, all three bodies, working on our MLK commemorations. I was going to have Colleen describe them, but I think I'll just move through it. But bottom line was, there were a number of events. I hope you took advantage of some of them. One was a Witness to History talk and documentary screening of the Arts Council short documentary called Conversations and Courage. The visit, it focused on the visit by Martin Luther King to Eastview Church. There was a public library, human library event where people who, actors acted out on behalf of the book that they represented. And then lastly, we had Reverend Naomi Tutu come visit here in the city, as well as down to City Club. A terrific speaker, an amazing woman. If you had a chance to see her. We started to talk about Forward Together, trying to kind of, if you will, change the focus to one which is, this is really a process, not a project. I think a lot of people kind of got, and maybe I didn't do as good a job as I should have, to make it clear that we're talking about all kinds of things. And we were focusing on schools and buildings so much because of what the schools were doing and some of the things that the city needs to do. But there are so many ways that we can collaborate and work together. We will continue to do that. So that ends my brief update. If you want me to spend a few minutes on the maintenance agreement, I'm sorry, the framework agreement, I can, or the rec, or not.
I think that would be good if you have something you'd like to present on the framework.
I'll try to be short. Okay. On the framework, as Annette mentioned, the framework is the agreement that's short for the framework for maintaining a safe and just Shaker Heights. This was approved by council last year. There's a web page on our web page that you can go see all the information. But there were really four key components to the framework. One was a community-wide listening project, and we'll come back to these, but community-wide listening project, the planned and hoped for, which I think will absolutely come to fruition, an expansion of the city's mental health response program, creating a community advisory group, and improving public access to public records, particularly for the police department. We started, and we meet every week or every other week, a group internally that work on this project. Colleen Jackson, who's overseas right now, but has worked very, very hard with a team of people, really interdisciplinary across the city departments, to work to have this project come to fruition. We are about ready to take to our committees and council this month approval of a consultant that will help us on the listening project. This is intended to be an opportunity for the public throughout the community to provide feedback, get their ideas, get their thoughts on a wide range of topics, but particularly relating to policing, social justice issues, and so forth. The second topic is the mental health expansion program. This, for those of you, I hope you're all familiar with it, but it is the joint dispatch of a social worker or mental health professional with our first responders. We've had a pilot program going on here in Shaker with really the guidance of Jerry Chaikin, our CAO, our two chiefs, police and fire, Annette Anastati, Dan Crispino, particularly from the police on this. But basically what we are now moving towards is a regional program involving 5 communities, 4 others plus Shaker, that are all part of our joint dispatch. And we are, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we are getting very close to finalizing and initiating that expansion, which has been something many of us, including residents and staff, have been working on for quite a while. So very positive there. The Community Advisory Board, this is a more informal advisory group that advises the police chief, the mayor, the CAO, and council on a wide range of topics, including the implementation of recommendations coming out of the listening project, feedback on policing policies and practices, and as well as input on the mental health response program. We are taking applications for, if you have an interest, so there's a description and there's an ability, if you go to our website and click on committees, it'll take you to a place where you can put in information and you can check the box for this advisory group. And I think that's through, Jerry, through the end of the month, I think. You can sign up for that. So that's on the framework agreement. On recreation, we are just about ready to kick off our recreation study. We have hired our contractor, MKSK, to be working with us on this. They have a strong record of community outreach, which is very, very important. This is going to be really a critical project, the main goals of which are to get community input and assess our needs, assess our current state and current trends, develop a strategic plan that includes particular possible sites, and an estimation of probable costs. This will be a full year project, probably from March to March, but is very critical and being done at the same time, intentionally done at the same time as the schools are working on their facilities, so that we are working together and not at cross purposes, and we are integrating all of our efforts. So with that, I'm going to stop and turn it back to Frank.
Thank you, Mayor. We have a number of questions that have been coming in. And I guess since we were talking about recreation here at the very end, let me start with that question. We had a couple come in, and they're very similar to each other. There are ongoing requests for more recreation options, especially older people, older youth, and what can be provided them in the near term, and particularly with the schools taking Woodbury first and losing the pool at Woodbury and tennis courts and some of the recreation opportunities for adults and older youth that are not in the schools. What can the city do to help with that disruption, if any?
Well, we'll be knee deep, so in that process. So without a doubt, we will do our best. And again, we have all kinds of people. Alex Nichols, who's our head of recreation, who has COVID or would have been here tonight. But she is really taking the lead with a number of other people in the administration to move this project forward and work through as best we can, continuing to provide opportunities for recreation during this project. I will tell you in all candor, because most of you know I'm pretty straightforward on these things, it's going to be bumpy. There's no question about it, particularly as the schools get further and further into their process. So just give you one example. I think on the last meeting that the school board had on facilities, the Woodbury will be closed at the end of this academic year. And so that provides some real challenges for us. We lose a gym, we lose a pool, access to those. Now, when this project gets all done and complete, it will be fabulous. It will be fabulous. But in the meantime, it's going to be very tricky and very challenging. So I don't want to mislead anyone about that. Having said that, though, the rec report will try to address what the needs are, and particularly with respect to seniors. That has been a recurring theme that I hear regularly, that we don't have enough space, we don't have enough activities that we would like to have, particularly for seniors. I am confident that between the school buildings and the locations that we are looking at, that are city-owned sites, that we will make it work. But people are going to have to probably be a little patient as we work through. Now, some things won't be a problem. This building, at least initially, will continue to be a place where we can hold senior programming, and will. But particularly with things like basketball courts and pools and potentially fields, those are going to be challenged while we go through this process. But again, this is I was going to say life transforming. I guess it would be life for our city, transformative for the next decades and decades to come with what we're doing. It will shape what we have and how we view our community and value recreation for decades to come. I should mention that we are looking at, not only are the schools looking at their facilities, but we also are looking at ours, including Thornton Park, the middle school, which eventually will be available. This area, the colonnade area between this building and the library, the Shelton Park area, as well as probably a couple other places in the city. So we're going to have to be. It'll be very interesting on the community engagement side. I encourage everyone to come to as many of those as you can get to, because it'll be you'll be able to really voice your opinion on these topics.
Yeah, and you touched on it just briefly, but I know the goal has been for the city to be involved in the middle school site when it's available, but it obviously is going to be space for a lot of students coming in and out. So have you had discussions with the schools about sharing with Thornton Park and the middle school site and being able to take some of this stress off the schools?
Well, we have talked with the schools regularly about a lot of these issues. Now, some are still being developed, so we don't have concrete answers on them as we sit here today. But there are some very basic logistics that are a challenge. So the middle school site is one you've correctly noted, because it's unlikely that we will have access to that site probably until 2030. It could be. So, but a lot depends on what we want to do. And so that may or may not be problematic. So just as an example, if we know the rink, and shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone, the ice rink is nearing the end of its useful life. We don't know how long it will survive in its current state. So if the decision was made for a variety of reasons that the rink should eventually go to the middle school site, we'll have to figure out whether that's actually going to be feasible or not, or how we make that transition. But that's not the only option. Are there other options to leave the rink, for instance, on its current site, maybe turn it a little bit to get a full sheet of ice, but it may stay right where it is, and then the middle school wouldn't be an issue for that particular topic. So it's really going to be an iterative process where we figure out what people want, what we can provide, and the logistics for doing it. But I will say this, though, that doing this in coordination with the schools is exactly what Forward Together was intended to do. They're going to build an auditorium at the middle school, at Woodbury eventually, that we will absolutely be sharing access to that. And so rather than try to do this on a disjointed basis, we have an opportunity here that we have to take advantage of with the schools doing what they're doing and us on recreation.
Changing subject just a minute, you mentioned earlier about around the Shaker Square area, we've had issues with inspections and things not working in some of the buildings there. Recently, the city of Cleveland has begun issuing citations for building code violations and that sort of thing. Is that an idea that might appeal to Shaker?
Well, we already do. We already do that, and I know this has been a sensitive and a difficult and a challenging topic, frankly, because if you don't have hot water, or you don't have heat in the middle of winter, that's a very serious situation. And so we've had inspections both, and this has been to clarify, because this has been a point of some confusion, excuse me, that our inspections are done, Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, on an exterior basis every three years. We have inspections on point of sale, and then we have interior inspections every 3 years. So we've been doing that for quite a while. The one issue that's been challenging has been the pandemic, because frankly we were not able to do some of those interior inspections during COVID, and so we were not able to get into some of the or any of the units during COVID. So there's no question that we are behind in some of those inspections, but we are working hard to get them up to speed. And I have to say, we had an all hands on deck between police, fire, building and housing, and others in our staff to make sure that no resident, let me flip the other, every resident had a place where they could go on at least on a temporary basis with heat and hot water. And with very few exceptions, I think we accomplished that goal.
Changing subjects now, the city of Cleveland, since 2015, had a police review board that's comprised of community members who are not police officers, and they have access to review citizen and internal reports of police officer misconduct. Will the community advisory group in Shaker serve that same purpose and have the same ability to help the police department resolve reports of misconduct from citizens, or even maybe internal reports of other officers?
The short answer is no. What the city of Cleveland has is very different than what we're doing as part of the framework. Just by way of history, and others are much more knowledgeable about this than I in some areas. The boards that you've mentioned about in the city of Cleveland really arose out of a number of different factors. One were some very specific incidents that occurred within the police department in Cleveland. They eventually were subject to a court order, and so what they're doing has a very different purpose. It's completely different than what we're doing. What this advisory group is just that. It is advising the mayor, the police chief, the CAO, and council. And it's very specific. And by the way, you can see the resolution creating the framework on our website. It's very specific about what that advisory group covers and gives advice on. And so it includes the implementation of the listening tour. It involves advice that the chief may ask of the advisory group dealing with police policies and procedures. It's intended to give advice to the administration on the expansion of the mental health and so forth. So these are all topics that are very specific and well spelled out in the framework agreement. We've never, in Shaker, we've not had the same kind of issues that the city of Cleveland has had, frankly, over the years. And so it's just apples and oranges in terms of its scope and a charter.
Different question, and this is a sore subject, I'm sure, after last night, but there's been a significant neighborhood resistance to John Carroll University's plans at Fairmount Circle. Can you comment on any progress that's been made in that regard?
Yes. This has been a project that we've been working on for I don't know, a number of months, or maybe even going on close to a year. And it was all kind of born out of John Carroll's originally desire to redevelop what they call the Gateway project, which are the sort of either side of the main university thoroughfare to the east of Fairmount Circle. And that project more recently was put on hold because of economic reasons, financing costs, et cetera. And so as a result of that, they were not building additional housing units above the commercial and retail areas that they had planned on. And so they asked for a change in the zoning code to basically convert, and they own 4.5, I know it sounds crazy, but they own half of a building, and that's half in Shaker and half in University Heights. So they own 4.5 buildings in Shaker that they wanted to turn into student housing. And so the question really was, where is it appropriate to have student housing? And they requested that student housing be permitted in a multifamily district and within 1,500 feet of the university. I know this kind of gets technical and in the weeds a little bit here, but suffice it to say that some of the buildings that had almost only students anyway, so turning a building like that into student housing may be less problematic than the other 3 buildings that they have, which have almost no students, and they have many seniors living in those buildings. And so we've had lots of discussions with John Carroll about ways that could address some of their issues and yet make sure that we were addressing the issues of the residents of these buildings. To make matters even a little more complicated, the city wanted to make some changes as well, some relating to economic development in terms of rezoning, and some dealing with student housing and in the community. So last night, so these 2 ordinances have been kind of moving along in tandem. Last night, City Council approved the city's recommendation for changes for these zoning changes that impact the city economic development. And the ordinance that John Carroll has been seeking got referred back to the Planning Commission for further study based on ongoing conversations that we've been having with the university. It is my hope that we can find some common ground on the issues that remain open. But it'll take a little bit more time, which is part of the reason for referring it back to the Planning Commission. And if that's as hard to absorb as I think it feel free to catch me later and ask
Hi.
Joyce or Bill Gruber, our law director. We'll fill you in.
I
Clear as
observe-
mud, right?
I observe the city council meetings, and I know that it's hard for me sometimes to understand.
Yeah.
And it is I know that the neighborhood people have been making a lot of comments, so thank you very much.
Yeah.
A little different, this is more specific. You were talking about the shared parking along South Lee Road.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a question, is there a date set for beginning that work? And I think this must be a close-by neighbor who's wondering how it may impact them.
Well, we will start as soon as we can. Because of the timing of our funding, most of the major construction won't start really till 2027. But we're hoping that we can lay all the groundwork that we can possibly lay in advance of that date, so that we're ready to really hit the ground running as soon as those dollars become available. So in the meantime, we're looking for additional funding. We will start working on preliminary design work. What else, Joyce, are we doing in the interim here? I'm sorry? Bus depot.
The actual shared parking on those 8 properties, if the grant we have applied for, we will know in April, and that would happen this summer if we get funded.
Yeah, we've applied for funding for this pilot program with the shared parking. Everybody knock on wood, and hopefully that will come through. But that we can do. We can do now. I can touch if you want on the bus depot or not.
I was just about to ask.
Okay.
What's the latest news on the bus depot?
Yeah.
Because my understanding is that's a critical path item for you.
It is, and again, this is a key parcel that we've been talking about for quite a while, publicly as well as with the schools. And this is the bus depot and the maintenance building that's really smack dab in the middle of Lee Road between Chagrin and Scottsdale. And it is a key parcel for a variety of reasons. Just to give you a couple, the use is not particularly one that we want in an area that we're trying to redevelop with mixed use and businesses and residences. Having 40 buses sitting there overnight and then coming in now during the day is just not compatible with what we're trying to create on Lee Road. So that piece is critical because it's also located immediately adjacent to Shelton Park and immediately adjacent to the parcel that some people will remember is the car wash site that had a car wash on there many, many years ago. It's been torn down. It's a vacant piece of property. But if you were to combine the bus depot, Shelton Park, and this additional city parcel, it would be the largest developable piece of property on Lee Road. And the discussion that we had with the community and the residents about what they wanted to see there is to really create a center, a gathering place. And so we don't know exactly what it will look like, but what we do know is that we will have some green space, it will have open area, it may have some buildings, it may have expanded athletic outdoor activities, and there are all kinds of creative ideas that people came up with. And it is it's a critical piece, but also one that's very, very tricky. Obviously, we're trying to move 40 buses and a maintenance and repair place, repair shop to some other place. And there aren't a ton of spots in Shaker. And so we've even been looking candidly outside of Shaker if need be. But this year, we will be working very, very hard along with the rec study to try to figure out exactly how these things can all meld together and come up with a site that we'll really be proud of and that will be the heart of the Lee Road District.
In a nearby development, there's been a lot of infill housing that's been built, particularly in the Moreland area and near Van Aken. And I have to admit myself, I've seen a lot of them, and they look really good. Those neighborhoods are really attractive now. A lot of the vacant properties in Shaker have been sold to neighbors, and we've seen a lot of neighbors using their adjacent properties. How, with the housing market you were just referring to in Shaker, is that going to be, will we see more infill housing in Shaker?
I think the short answer is yes, I hope so. Now it's got to be done appropriately, and it needs to be sensitive in how and what we're building in infill development. But you know, if you look back, you know, just a couple of years ago, we had literally hundreds of vacant sites in our community coming out of the Great Recession, and that's not a good situation. No one wants vacant properties in their neighborhood, and so we came up with a strategy, which I believe has worked pretty much as we hoped it would, which was that there would be different types of properties in our community. Some would be appropriate for additional housing, some might not be. And so while the market really wasn't there, we made improvements to many of these vacant lots. And frankly, when I became mayor, we started looking at how many of these could, one, be realistically absorbed, and two, whether they should be or held for infill development, even though the market wasn't as strong as we wanted it to be at that time. And that's exactly what's happened over the past few years. Properties that we didn't think were as appropriate for infill housing, we sold to neighbors. And that initiative has been very successful. Our residents have been happy to acquire properties, particularly in Shaker, where many times the lots are small, and for those that wanted a larger lot, they had an opportunity to buy that. And we got a property put back in productive use. It frankly saved the city dollars in terms of maintaining a lot of these vacant lots. And so that was a positive. Over the last, Kyle, 12 months, the infill market has really picked up. And yes, there are a number of properties that are now either have been built. I think the last numbers I saw were something like 9 already built and either sold or to an owner, and another, 30 to 40 that are under a contract to be developed in various stages. I will say this, that there are always going to be issues when you're doing infill housing, and we've had lots of conversations with the neighborhood and the residents to make sure we're listening and sensitive to their concerns. Frankly, one of them is that these new infill housing are going for prices that are higher than historic in some of our neighborhood or sub-neighborhoods. And people are worried about what's the impact of higher values on these new infill properties have on their property. And that issue is one is challenging. There's no question about it, but it's one that's extremely important and one that is being dealt with all over this region. As part of that hearing that took place, the Senate select hearing on housing, this topic was a topic of quite a topic of conversation about how can we, what can we do, or what ideas are out there to encourage infill housing, but not, or at least mitigate some of the downside that may happen with increases in valuations for people who have lived in their house for many, many years. I have had multiple conversations with residents who have said, I'm happy about the infill housing. It's beautiful. I'm glad to see it coming. I see young people moving into the neighborhood. It's great. Just don't force me to move because I can't pay the taxes on my house that I've lived in for 30 years. So we have to work through that and figure that out. Not an easy problem, but one that I think we'll be working hard on.
Here's a couple that I'll roll together, and it concerns the western end of our city, in Shaker Square particularly. You know, a lot of the infill housing is down in that area, and people are very excited about that. They're excited about the new apartments and condos in that end. But question is, I realize it's not in Shaker, but what about Shaker Square itself? How are we working with the city of Cleveland and the county and the RTA and the other groups to do something about Shaker Square? There's some concern about that area.
Great question, and I appreciate it. And it is also one where for many people, there's still confusion. People come and say, what are you doing about Shaker Square? Is it the same as Shaker, and are you doing the same things there? And we have to remind everyone that Shaker Square is not technically in the municipality of Shaker Heights, but it is within the school district of Shaker Heights. So notwithstanding that sort of quirk of fate or history as to how that all occurred, the reality is we are very, very interested in the success of Shaker Square. We always have been and probably always will, going back decades. Friends of Shaker Square and a variety of other groups that are active in the Shaker Square, and frankly the Larchmere area as well. The good news is that Tanya Maness, our former Shaker Economic Development Director, now runs an organization along with a CDC that took control, was able to buy the Shaker Square property itself so that it stayed in local hands as opposed to owned by outside interests who have no idea how valuable and the history and the meaning of Shaker Square is to not only Shaker Square, but to Shaker Heights as well. And so we routinely work with the ownership group of Shaker Square on a variety of topics. They have a visioning project that they're going through right now. Joyce or Jerry, do you know what the timing is on that?
They have hired a consultant, it should start soon, and it will have public engagement as one of the first steps.
Okay, so again, and this is kind of round two of this. About 2 years ago, they looked at a visioning, and if you recall back then there was a lot of discussion about whether they should be closing the street that runs through Shaker Square, and things kind of ground to a halt. This is a process of reinvigorating that discussion and putting in place a plan to make Shaker Square grow. So we are supportive of that and are involved with that visioning process. We've also been asked to look at and consider providing additional safety services in the Shaker Square, Larchmere area through our police department and Chief Hudson, as well as RTA, who has its own police force and obviously is integral to Shaker Square as well. We are in the process of discussing those ideas and how something might work along those lines, or maybe how it needs to be adjusted. But we are open to having those conversations and have already started. We had actually a meeting a couple months ago with the city of Cleveland, both their safety services as well as others, neighborhood residents that are interested in this, along with RTA and Shaker. So we are very committed to making sure, frankly, you know, we our forces drive right by it every day, going to Larchmere and other parts of Shaker Heights, and so it just makes sense. Plus, we have so many people in that area that lived in Shaker and now moved into Cleveland, but still have great ties to Shaker as well as to Shaker Square. So we are very, very supportive of that and will continue to be.
Back at the other end of the city, on the eastern end, had a question. Any plans to provide solar arrays for powering the e-chargers at Van Aken?
I'm sorry, for charging.
Charging for resupplying electricity for the charging stations.
Oh, for the charging
At
stations.
the RTA stand.
That's interesting. I'm not sure that we've looked at that, but it certainly would be interesting to look at. We have, besides the electrification that I talked about earlier tonight, we have been doing things to help encourage solar for particularly for homes. There was a lot, a little bit of a transition, right? Because Shaker, our architecture and our homes are near and dear to our hearts, and so the thought for some people of putting solar panels on rooftops could be, a little disturbing. But we are working through that and encouraging it. And our planning or our architectural review board is helping that process, so that people can find ways to put solar on their homes. We've not, to my knowledge, looked at that as a possible power source for our charging stations, but it's a great idea, and we should probably look into it.
In the same area, very specific question, when will pre-leasing begin for the Arcadia development?
Oh, for the Arcadia.
That's a little premature, but I'll ask it anyway.
Yeah, well, breaking ground in the late summer, fall, it's probably a 18 to 24-month construction period. So my guess is pre-leasing would start a year or so after they break ground, maybe a little bit more. So if they break ground this summer, it'll be probably a year from this summer. Now, on the Phase 2 of the Van Aken district, the Fay, which is, the Ray building, which is a new name for Phase 2. That building is pre-leasing, and so you can call and put your name on a waiting list or and provide an expression of interest that you might have. And as the interior of that building gets completed, you'll eventually be able to start having conversations about leasing that, and that part much sooner, springtime. Bikeways.
People are excited about bikeways, and that's not a surprise, I'm sure, to you. Are there plans for bikeways along other major streets in Shaker? We're talking about bikeways on Shaker Boulevard, Van Aken, and Lee Road already. But how about Fairmount, South Woodland, and Warrensville Center?
So the short answer is I and many people in our sustainability committee and many others, and cyclists and in the community, the short answer would be we'd like to put them wherever we can put them. If it works, we would love to put them in. So the challenge, though, is that there are logistics and mechanics, frankly, on some of these sites. The roads may not be conducive to a separate protected bike lane. Other ones may be. So let me give you a couple examples of what we are doing. So the Warrensville multipurpose path is an example of trying to provide additional bike lanes, but where it didn't fit in the roadway, but we were able to get the multipurpose path next to it, and so that's what we did. We are now looking at a bike lane at a minimum along Van Aken, really from Farnsley, from the Van Aken district, all the way down to Lee Road. And then when we do the Lee Road project, the intent is to put a separate protected lane along Lee Road. So those are two that are currently in process. Well, I shouldn't say. The Van Aken, we are actively looking at that. We have consultants and working specifically on that. Lee Road, when we start the work on the design, we will work there. But other streets don't really work as well. They're just not quite large enough to have a protected lane, but we put in other things. So for instance, South Woodland, not wide enough for a protected lane, but you can put in what we refer to as sharrows, where you've got the little bike sign and the arrows where people, driving cars, know that there may well be a bicyclist in that area. So we do it where we can, but as much as we can, but not everywhere. And it may not have the same, it may not be a protected lane, it may be something slightly different, but we're anxious to do it wherever we can. I should comment that there are some that are worried about the implications of having bicycles in the roadway and how they could get out of driveways and so forth. And those are very legitimate concerns, and but are ones that we think can be solved, and are working through that, particularly for those in along Van Aken going westbound on Van Aken, coming out of the Van Aken district. We've had lots of conversations, and very positive ones, and gotten some good feedback. So again, a good opportunity for community engagement.
Changing course just a minute for this question. We've gotten some money, grant money, for the police department, and to do a lot of things, very productive things there. One of them was the use of drones by police to track people coming through Shaker, and not have to use police cars in a chase or having to go down side streets in order to intercept. And the drone provides some benefits in those cases. But I know from a fact from our meetings that there's residents who are very concerned about drones and the privacy concerns of using drones. How will Shaker Police address these privacy concerns?
Thanks. It's a great question, and one that we've been having conversations about. So it's a very appropriate time to raise it. First of all, I wanted to just give a shout out to the chief on the work that he's been doing since he came to Shaker. A lot of community outreach, which has been terrific. He's also and his team have found dollars all over the place, whether they be grants or, in this case, forfeiture dollars that we can tap into to really do some of the things that we previously didn't have the funds to do. And drones was one topic that came up in the conversation, and I think at a later time the chief can fill us all in on all the benefits, but there are clearly benefits to the appropriate and proper use of drones. You mentioned one of them, tracking the movement of a car that we may be pursuing. We can do it very differently than we do today if we had drones. But there absolutely are privacy issues, which we all acknowledge. And so there are a couple things that will happen. First of all, it's not, we'll have to see when we actually get the drones, number one. But even once we start down that path, a policy will be developed for Shaker Heights that will address those privacy issues. There's a wide range of other topics, all relating to drones. It'll be a policy that will come up through our internal processes. Well, I'm sure we will have discussions at the committee level. Council has also raised concerns or questions about it as well. And so we will have to work through those things in Shaker. On top of that, there are both state and federal very specific rules and regulations regarding the use of drones for law enforcement purposes. And so the chief is well aware of that and is all over that. So our policy will comply not only with those rules and regulations, but with what we want to do here and what we're comfortable doing within Shaker.
Yeah, thank you. I don't have any other questions right now, and it just seems to have worked out perfectly. I want to thank everybody for attending and participating and asking these questions. And you must care about the future of Shaker Heights. It's time to close. The mayor's been on the hot seat for a while, and he's done very well, I think. And we need to vacate the meeting place in just a few minutes. I think we got all of the questions. We didn't miss any of them. And we had about 24 come in. So video of tonight's session will be posted on YouTube. You can find the link at the Shaker Heights chapter on the League of Women Voters Greater Cleveland site. That's lwvgreatercleveland.org, all one word. Please support programs of this kind by helping to defray the expenses for live streaming and recording. On the screen, you should see a Dollars for Democracy with information on how to donate to the League. If you are not already a League member, if you found this event interesting and worthwhile, please also consider joining the League of Women Voters. Membership information is available at the back table here, and we're easy to find on the internet, again, under lwvgreatercleveland, one word, .org. Also, if you've not yet signed the anti-gerrymandering petition, we have petitions here, and we'd like to ask you to spend just a minute signing one of those petitions before you leave. Thank you, and good night.